Hello everyone. In this video, I want to talk about how I take the handwriting from the Books device, Supernote, and then get it into my note-taking app, which works on the desktop that you're typically used to typing in. Now, there's typically challenges between any kind of handwriting, whether you're using a physical notepad or a digital e-ink tablet, doing your handwriting, and then getting that converted to go over into a more text-based type of note-taking app. If you're someone that's doing a bunch of this type of juggling and you're using both, then I have a process that I've been using that might be interesting here for you to see. Both of these devices do have handwriting to text conversion, but I found them to be very limiting in how they work. They also are not as reliable depending on your handwriting. If it's a bit messy, you could have a lot of things that you're correcting because it's not converting things properly. So I have two different devices here that I use, and that adds in a little bit more complexity into the workflow when you're putting stuff in two different devices. Most of the time, I know what I'm putting in one versus the other, but here I'm showing where I have literally the same date on these things, and I started journaling on one and then went to a transition to another one here. And even when I do this type of thing here where I just swap in the middle of the day and there's information from both for the same date, I can still easily take the information and have it converted. And then I have a process, obviously, that makes it a lot easier to get into my note-taking app at the end of the day. So if you're looking for a process, maybe this will help you out. As I mentioned before, each of these do have their own handwriting to text converting process. I do not use it. And the only thing I use these devices for is for the handwriting, and then I leverage their sync capabilities because that's going to be critical to getting the note information in one form or another to my laptop to where I take the handwriting and I convert it to text. So on both of these devices, you will need to set up the syncing. On the Books device, this is actually on both of them, it's fairly easy. But on the Books device, you just go into the notes settings here. You bind a third-party account. There's plenty of accounts to choose from, but the ones that I leverage that worked for this particular process will be the ones where it puts a folder on your desktop or on your PC device, somewhere on your disk, and then it syncs the data from the cloud to that particular folder. So OneDrive, Google Drive, Dropbox, those will work in this particular situation. As you see here, I have a Google Drive and a OneDrive set up on this Books device, just testing which one works more reliably. And I found that OneDrive works better in this scenario, mostly because while the device will sync to the cloud reliably, when it says it's synced, it actually synced, and you can go to the cloud using your browser and you can see that the folder and files, if both of those were needed, that those have been created. But what I found is that on many occasions, the cloud stuff did not sync to my device, even when I have the folder set up to be kept local, because that's another thing that I try to make sure that the main folder I'm using is set up to be kept local on my device, so it'll always sync anything into that folder. It'll always sync it to my device. But I've noticed that the Google Drive is not reliable in that sense. And I've had to stop and restart the service plenty of times, even multiple times in the same day, and even within the same hour sometimes when I've been testing this out. So OneDrive is the more reliable one for me. Your mileage may vary. Make sure if you're doing something like this that the syncing works as you expect it to. And I want to be mostly hands off on this particular process without having to manually step in and make sure things are synced. That was not what I wanted. So if you are okay with that, then maybe you can implement a process where you are a man in the middle, woman in the middle, and you're executing the sync process and getting things in line. So on this device here, once you have it, your account synced up, the only other tweak that I've made here is that the export as, I have it set up as a PDF. You're pretty much going to get a PDF option as the only option other than the book's native format, note format. But there is a vector PDF format that I think is the default option when you set this up. And that is good if you're going to repurpose these PDFs and leverage them in other applications for whatever reason. I found that through my process that just having them converted to bitmap, which is just mainly just an image, none of the strokes are editable when you open up the file that way, then this has been more reliable for me. So that's what I use. I'll go out of this one here. And once this is set up, the biggest convenience with the Boox over the Supernote from a syncing process is that the sync and the conversion happens all at once. So when you sync this to your third-party cloud provider, like I have it set up here, it will sync it, so it will send it to the cloud provider, and it will also send it as a PDF file. So it's converting it from its native note format to that PDF all in one stroke. So it's a lot simpler in this case. On the Supernote, on the other hand, its syncing process syncs the native note format. It does not convert it for you on the fly like you get with the books. So with the Supernote, there will typically be an extra step for converting that .note format to PDF or PNG or whatever, or text if you want, whatever other format. So that's the thing. One thing I liked a bit better about the syncing process on the books. The reason why I have both of these too is that I do like the front light that's on the Boox device. There are many cases where I need to be able to see what I'm actually writing and or reading on the screen. And because the Supernote doesn't have a front light, there are times where I just cannot see what's on the screen well, and it's just more convenient for me to grab the Boox device. So those scenarios are typically in the morning where I may be jotting down things, or just when I'm getting up, or when I'm going to bed and I'm doing some reading and some note taking at night there. But on the Supernote side here, setting up the sync is fairly easy as well. We can come in here into the settings, and when you go into the drive option here, you get the 4 options where you can either use the Supernote Cloud, Dropbox, Google Drive, or OneDrive, similar to what you can do on the books, other than the Supernote Cloud is proprietary to Supernote. But over here, the Supernote Cloud option also gives you an extra bonus feature here, is that it has auto sync. So when you are doing your handwriting and then you exit out of the note over here, it will sync automatically in the background, versus the other third-party options there you will have to manually do a sync. So having the auto sync is another bonus, and was the preferred for me because I want to be more hands off and not be a bottleneck within the process here, especially if I'm already switching from one device to another. Not every day, but most times I'm using both of these devices within the same day. I don't want to have to remember to sync them both as well. So they're both set up to automatically sync to my cloud provider or a cloud provider, and then that cloud provider is automatically set up to sync to my desktop. So with the Boox device, it syncs to my desktop via OneDrive, and over on the Supernote Partner app is what I leverage to sync this over to my desktop, and it's pretty quick, almost real time on the Supernote side. And yeah, I think it's pretty user friendly. You get a lot of other features in the partner app as well. But for this particular use case, all I'm using it for is to sync the native note files from Supernote to my desktop. So now that we have these things set up to sync to my desktop, let's actually go over to the desktop and look at the process for converting each of the native formats into a text-based format that I can then import into my note-taking app. So now that we're on the desktop, let's check the folders and the partner app here. We can see we have the Supernote partner app. It is syncing all of the different notes that I have within my Supernote. I have it set up to sync that. And then I also have a folder here for the Boox device. It puts it in a Onyx folder, and then it'll put the name of the actual device. And then from there, it will drill down into notebooks, and within the notebooks area there, then it will drill down into the different folders you will have on your device. And you will only see the stuff that has synced in real time after you've set it up. So the sync for the Boox device is not something that's going to sync everything that needs to be synced that hasn't been put in this folder, like the Supernote partner app here. So you will not see every note on the Onyx or Boox side if you have not edited it. So I just wanted to point that out. So as I kind of show this off, understand one works a lot differently than the other does. A couple other folders I have set up here, and I will get into these here once I talk about the setup, is I have a Supernote folder here. And this Supernote folder is where I'm converting the native format into a PNG. And then there's also the transcribed folder here, which is the folder where all the transcriptions are being sent, whether it's from Boox or from Supernote, they go here. Basically, the way I have it set up is that the main folder here, anything that changes in this folder will get consumed by the automation and then run through the process. So let me show the actual process here. So I'm using N8N for this here. And what we have configured here, I have three different things. Two are more important for the conversion piece of it. And the third one is basically for sending the information over into Capacities. The first one that we're going to look at here is the bigger one, which is transcribe PDFs and images. We'll go ahead and click into this one here. This is the longest process that we have set up here, and the one that does the meat of everything here. So the first part of the process, let me go ahead and zoom in into this here. The first part of the process is basically a local file trigger, and this will watch the folder that I have set up for any changes to the file, and also for files that have been added to a particular folder tree. So any folders, subfolders, if any files have been added or changed in that particular hierarchy, then this will get triggered. The next thing that gets hit within the flow here is that I do have a certain scenario where on the Supernote side, because I'm converting these into images, when the conversion happens, if the Supernote note file had more than one page, it will create a page 0, a 1, a 2, 3, however many pages that the note had in it, and these will be separate pages. So what I also included in this process is to combine those pages into one, so I only have one transcript file. When I first started out, there were multiple files sometime, and when I do the conversion and within the process flow, if you haven't seen it, I have AI do the transcription. It would treat these as completely separate files when technically it's one note with multiple pages, but it would treat them as if they were all just single separate notes. So I wanted to combine everything into one image so that when it gets to AI, it sees it as one thing. and it'll combine everything into one. So this here just excludes anything that has an underscore, and then typically what will happen, there will be a number behind this within the file name. This just excludes it here. So it looks for it, and if it contains that there, what it does is it just ignores it. Everything else will go to the next part of the process, which is just filter. And let me see if I make the screen a little bigger, if that helps. The filter, what it does is I'm just looking for PDF, PNG, JPEG, and JPG. Now, these last two are more me thinking ahead, where I potentially might have these formats where if I'm jotting things down on paper and I take an image of it, potentially that process might format in a JPEG. So I'm just looking forward here to a potential use case that might come up where I might need to also convert those formats and do the transcription for it. But right now I don't have a need. Basically making sure everything is in PNG and also PDF right now. So this filters and makes sure it's only picking up these files, because I don't want to get any other garbage that might not be supported. Next, I have a read files from disk. So this will, once it actually sees that there was a change and it meets the criteria, then this will actually just get the full path to that file. It reads it also. So if there's any data in there, then it makes sure it takes that in as a raw format. Then what I do here in the next step, you can see we get into the AI portions here. I'm using Google Gemini for the AI here because I know that Google Gemini works with PDFs. Well, I've tried with OpenAI and with Claude, and I've noticed that if you give it a PDF that is formatted as an image, where again there's no text really in it, it could be an image with text, but if you give it an image-based PDF, especially the ones here where they're just handwriting, they don't like it and they completely error out from what I've experienced. So Google Gemini worked for me, and those are ones that I used to manually put the PDF in and do this process, where now I'm just using N8N to automate the entire flow. So the upload file here is, I'm using it to take that raw file and it will upload it here using the Gemini node here. And then on the next side, I just take that uploaded file and I leverage it with the Google Gemini 2.5 Pro model. And then in here, the meat of it here is I have it transcribed word for word, put the transcription under the heading transcribed. Also interpret any drawings or visuals if you find any, and put what you've interpret under the heading drawings and visuals. And then last here, I tell it to provide a list of actions that still needs to be completed, if there are any, with the heading action items, and then format it this way. So there's basically 3 sections of the output that I will get. And the first one would just be the transcript. So just take all the handwriting and convert it, similar to what you would get with the native handwriting to text conversions that you have on the devices. But I do think that the Google does a better job, or either of the guys that support this process does a better job than the on-device setup. And then it will take any images. So if I doodle anything on the note, draw out workflows and things like that, they're just dumping stuff. It will try to interpret those and give them meaning when it does the transcription as well. So it'll say, I saw a flow chart or a certain type of diagram, things like that there, and it will add it to the file. And then on the other last piece of it, if there's anything that I said I needed to do, or, led the AI to think that it was something that was actionable, it will separate those and put those in there as well. So much more customization here. I can come in here and I can always tweak this, ask for more information. And this is where the power comes in, where if you set up your own workflow, you're not just getting the plain vanilla stuff out of the box from the device. Then once it does this output, I have it convert that into a text right here. And it's basically just taking the information from the one, it's converting it to text, and then it dumps it into a data variable there. And then I have it where it just writes that to the text file here. So this is the meat of the process here. It's somewhat lengthy, but it's not really that complex of a process and workflow here. So when you do set this up though, you do want to make sure the folder structure is set up properly before you make this flow active. So do your testing without the process flow being active. Just come down here and you can do the execute workflow so that it only goes one at a time, and make changes to your notes and your files and see what happens. It works, but if you set it up wrong, you could get errors or you could get into a loop. I did that once where I didn't do the filter correctly, and it was basically just catching files and then redoing the new file that got created. And then that file would create a file, and then it would actually start looping through here. So depending on how you set it up, you could run into some issues, but make sure you're testing it before you just make everything production ready here. Now, this flow is the foundation. It will take care of any PDFs, images that get saved underneath that folder hierarchy, my main one. The next one is getting the Supernote converted to PNG, and then making sure I save that PNG into the folder structure that I have here as my foundation. The folder that I'm using by default here is the books folder that I have on the OneDrive. It could be a different folder, but since I've been using the books a bit more, I'd say a bit more, I've had it the longest and I've used it the most. So I set that up as the primary because I still see myself always going to use this device just because of the front light, and it has pretty good functionality on it. So not to say it's better than the Supernote, it's just an easier grab for me because it does have that front light. That's one of the bigger ones. So that is the main folder I'm using, and then I'm just sending everything else to that folder structure in order to get converted. So for the Supernote flow, let's go ahead and take a look at that one. This one is a lot simpler than the other, and we only have 4 different pieces here. I'm still looking at the folder for any changes or additions to this particular file path, and I'll show you where these file paths are mapped when I get to how you actually set up N8N, because there is some setup on that end as well if you haven't set it up before. So yes, this is doing pretty much the same thing like I had in the previous one, where if there's any changes to this folder structure here, and this basically maps to the note folder for the partner app. So when the partner app syncs, there's a daily journal folder where all my daily journals go, and any notes, if they go into that folder, then they get captured here. Or if any changes to the note, they also get triggered here. And then there's a filter, and this filter just makes sure that I'm only getting the .note format. The other one is where I do the conversion. And on here, I'm using the Supernote tools in order to do the conversion. So this is nothing that comes native within N8N. I have to set up the Docker container, which is basically just running Linux underneath, to have this particular tool installed, the Supernote tool installed to do the conversion. So that's going to be another process of getting the Docker image set up. And then once it's running with N8N, as long as it have all the dependencies for the stuff that I'm calling here, then everything will just work. You can see here how I have it set up where it feeds in the file path here. I separate the path by all the slashes that you're going to get, because it could be in a lot of different folders and be deep underneath parent-child type folders. So I separate all that out, and then I basically just take the take the name of the actual file itself and then go through, setting it up to where I can just feed the information that I need to into these two variables here, and it does the conversion for me. Not terribly hard of a thing to do. And this here comes from the previous execution, where you can see here local file trigger, and it will feed the information over into here when it triggers. And then the next one here, I mentioned that if you have multiple pages, it will create multiple files, and it will put in _0, _1, and it'll just keep appending and incrementing the numbers depending on how many pages you have. This here takes those multiple image files that are for a single note, and it combines them into one PNG file. So one image file for multi-page note, just like similar to the one PDF file that we get over on the book side. That's basically what I'm doing here, just so that when I do the transcription, it's not trying to transcribe 3 different pages of a single note as if they were completely separate notes of their own. So this helps consolidate those things. So it has all the context for that particular note when it's doing its analysis, and the AI is going over it. And that is pretty much it for this particular process. So it saves it to that Supernote folder. And once that PNG is saved in there, the AI triggers. And as you saw from the one here, I do filter out if there are ones with the incrementing numbers on them, those get filtered out, so it doesn't try to convert those, and it'll only convert that final PNG from that Supernote process. And then the third one here, let's get into this workflow. The first piece here is the webhook portion here. And on the webhook portion, I just have URL that I have set up to call into. So it's a post I'm going to post into this, and then that'll trigger this particular flow. So I can do that using a script or something like that there on my laptop. So this is a local URL, so it can only be communicated with on my laptop or on my network, and I don't have any connectivity to this externally. The next piece, after it's triggered, I get the current date. And then in these other nodes here, what I do is I have 2 different formats, one for the books and then one for the Supernote. And the different formats is the date that's included in the name of the file. So on one of the devices, it has the 4-digit year, the month, and then the date, all one after another contiguously here without any dashes in between each of them. And then in the other file on the book side, I have a dash in between the year and in between the month and the date. So in order to get both of the different formats, I grab the date, and then I take the date and I just tell the read files to look for a date that's formatted in this format. And if it sees a file that's in here, then it will grab that file and then it will send it on. And then the other one, basically, again, it just does the same thing, but the format of the file that it's looking for is a little bit different, but it's only looking for the files for the current date that it pulled out of here. So this particular flow is really something that you use on once a day, preferably, but you can use it multiple times if you need to. But it won't pull everything that you've transcribed over multiple days, weeks, etc. Once it pulls in those files, then I go to this extract from file. And then all this is doing is pulling the data from the file, and then it's sending it on to the next task here. And this task is where it actually sends it to Capacities. So I'm doing a post to Capacities. I use the URL provided in the API documentation so that I pinned it to the daily note. So I do create a daily note early in the morning or whenever I get to Capacities, certainly before I'm doing this particular task. So it's going to append it at the end of the daily note. and I'll show that later in the video. The authentication type is generic type. I'm using the bare auth. All this, the configuration and settings are shown in the documentation, so it's easy to set this up here. And the meat and potatoes of it is here in the expression portion, where you need to select the space that we're sending it to. And then the MD text portion here has the rest of it. So it pulls in the data from the previous step. I'm also using the date that I captured earlier in the process as well. And I'm using here the $now. So it will put in a timestamp on when this is being basically triggered and then saved into. So when it sends to Capacities, there will be a timestamp letting me know that if I run this multiple times, then it'll let me know which one's the latest one, even though the latest ones will always be at the bottom. If I do it multiple times, I can at least remove the older ones. Then I put in the file name, so I'm pulling that out of the previous steps. And from the file name, then I actually take the data and I send the data here. And what I do here with this replace piece here is there's some characters that are within the format of the data that will mess up the JSON. I've tried it a few times here, and I've seen that I need to replace the new line characters that are in the documentation and replace them with other characters. So you'll see here I'm replacing that, and I'm also replacing some other stuff here that will cause this script not to run because of JSON errors. You can take a look here and you can just put these in just copy these and use them in your process, and it should work fine here. And it should work fine for you. So this has been working well for me. And that is pretty much it. I do have here where I have send body set up here and selected. So if you're looking here, you can see how I have this thing set up, and you can basically just copy what I have here. So that's it for this process. One more thing I wanted to show here, and that's going to be the Docker information. So if you want to set this up, and basically you just need to install Docker Desktop. If you want to see a video of that, let me know in the comments. And I'm just going to show you the Docker compose files and the Docker files here to make it easy for you to get this going. If you already somewhat know anything about Docker, or if you watch another video, you can just take a look at what I've done and basically just copy that. So let me open up the Docker compose file here. Pull this over. I have to shrink this window here. All right, so we got the Docker compose file, and one other file that you'll want to set up here too is this Docker file. So the Docker file here basically just sets it up so that I'm taking the NANIO image. You can use whatever image you want to, but this is the official image here that I'm using as a base. And then what I'm doing here is I'm installing these packages in it that is required for the Supernote tools that I'm going to install. And I also have the packages in here so that I can use Python to do the conversion of combining the images using Pillow here. And you can come in here and see where I'm doing the install of the pipx, and then setting up some environments down here. See the environment path, and I'm running pip install for the Supernote lib to get that installed. Then you see I'm switching over to the node and setting the environment path here. So all this stuff here is pretty simple to get going there. And then the Docker compose file. This is installing the NAN and also Postgres. So you get both of those included in this one Docker compose file. You will get two different containers, one for NAN and then a separate one for Postgres. And then everything will be set up here for you to use in your environment. And then basically the NAN leverages the Postgres as its database on the back end. The important part in here for the way I have it set up to do this particular process is going to be where I'm mounting the local drives. So right now I'm mounting the cloud drive to the books directory that's on OneDrive here. And then I'm mapping that to the data shared slash books. And then I'm also mapping the Supernote daily journal folder where I'm putting my different notes for the daily journals. I'm mapping that there here. So basically you can just go in and copy your path. I'm on a Mac here, just copy the full path, paste it in there, and then put where you want to map it to. I'm mapping both of these to data shared, and then again books, and then one into Supernote. So two separate folders there that's going to show up within the Docker container. So when you see the data shared in the NAN, this is how I have that mapped up, and basically why I'm using this, because this is mapping the container to local directories outside of the container, basically on my desktop, so it can have access to different stuff on my Mac. All right, so I have both devices set up here, and let's go ahead and show how this will work. So let me open up, I'll go ahead and open up the current day. I don't have anything crazy in it that I can't show. So I will put these both up here. And this one here on the book side, I'm using an infinite note that they have. This is a new thing option that they have here where basically I can just keep going and scrolling. Where on the older note handwritten note version, it's basically a page at a time and you have to swipe through pages. So I do this particular format. And what this does too is this produces a single file, a PDF for me, where it's just one big PDF without multiple pages on it on the back end too. So that helps. Now, if I come in here and I was to, let's just put new info, books right there. And all I need to do is just go back in order to have this go ahead and sync. And it will put the sync notifications up there at the top. And we'll see that it just kicked off and it just ran. And what we should see here on the desktop, if we should see that there is going to be a transcribed file created for the books. The books doesn't need to do a image conversion, so we will just get the text file that shows up here. And this text file, once we open it up here, it will open up and we will have the transcription. We can see it has the time, it has bulleted information. I can go ahead and open this up again so you can see what I had in one versus the other. I have bulleted information. It has action items that I need to do, which is a transcription from what's in the actual handwriting here, where it's action items and then a list of stuff. And then here it shows it just started raining and then new info from books. Here it shows the section for the drawings and visuals. And it basically just says here that it's lined paper and there are no drawings or visuals. And then it does have the action items here at the bottom, which is basically a repeat from the top. It did everything that I told it to do. So let's go over to the Supernote and let's see what we get on the Supernote device here. And we have right now it's set up there. And what I'm going to do on the Supernote device is I'm going to try to draw a couple things here where maybe I'm putting in here, this is the main, and then I'll put child 1, and over here, child 2. Down here, maybe I'll do a capture, organize, we'll do distill, and then basically code and execute. Execute here. I will put an arrow there. I put arrow to there, and then an arrow there. And outside of that, I think Maybe this should be good enough. Maybe we do a square, do start, then do a triangle with a question mark, and then we'll go stop. See, my art skills are not great. And here we'll just do circle where it goes, go. And maybe one more here where we do just put hold. All right, so I gave it, it has the text here up at the top. It has an action item. And then I put in a couple like drawings in here just so we can see what the AI will come back with. Let's go ahead and we'll close this note out so it'll sync. We'll go ahead and swipe here so we can see that it does sync here in the background. We have the partner app open here, so we should see that it start syncing as it just did there. It created an image here. We see it just deleted because it had an image in there previously that it created. So it deleted it, it created the new image. And if we open up the new image, we can see this is what it looks like here. And then if we open up the transcribed note, which is, you can see here, it's just the note name with text at the back of it. And if we open that up, we'll get some more information here. Some of the formatting might be a little bit off here, but if we come up here, we can see after it transcribed all of this stuff, it has main, and then it put in child 1, child 2. It did the capture with an arrow to organize. It has distilled with an arrow to execute. It took the start, put a question mark, and then arrows to stop. It has the go, it has the hold in there. So it did try to replicate the images or the flows that I had here in the handwriting and give it somewhat of some order there. And then in the drawing here, it put checkbox, and it says an unchecked square, and this is basically for the mouthwash. And then a hierarchy diagram, a simple diagram shows a word main with two lines branching out pointing to child 1 and child 2. This illustrates a parent-child of hierarchical relationship. And then it says there's a process diagram, and then a diagram showing 4 concepts: capture, organize, distill, and execute. Arrows indicating a flow from capture to organized, and so on. You can actually go through and see. It also did the flow chart here. Basic flow chart is drawn at the bottom of the page, and it shows where it begins here with start and has arrows to the different pieces. So I think it does a pretty good job of explaining any type of drawings or images that are in there and replicating those in a text format. Obviously, we have the images to go back to or the notes to go back to on the device. And then it also shows here at the bottom the action item from above where there's a task that hasn't been checked off. So it has done everything that I've wanted the AI to do. And then when I get this particular file back, I can easily just send this over to any application because it's in a text format. So you can take this and put it in Obsidian. I have it set up, a trigger set up to where it'll send it to Capacities. And also within this text format, when I'm doing this, I can easily capture this and put it into Recall AI, which is a new application that I've been using. This handwriting to text conversion format has been pretty helpful for me so far, and it pretty much works all the time. I've not had any issues. So some of the cons would be, or challenges that you might have, is if you're using this and you don't have this system up, because this system is running a Docker container that's running N8N. So that Docker container has to be running all the time for this to happen. If the Docker container goes down and there are any changes, it won't trigger them as changes because the process isn't up to monitor the folder. But I think 9 times out of 10, it's going to work. I'm on a laptop. I don't have to worry about power outages or anything like that with the laptop because the battery will keep it from just dying on me. Now, in Capacities, if I want to get this information over into Capacities, I think I have it set up here today. And let's come down here. And what I need to do here is I've set up a trigger in Alfred. We can open up Alfred here and let me open up preferences. And I'm using Alfred only because it has the ability to trigger things from a keyboard shortcut. And also from within here, I can also set it up so that it triggers a webhook, where in some snippeting tools, you cannot do that. So if I come in here, it's pretty simple. It's the webhook that shows what I need to use for the hotkey, and then the script to actually execute the webhook. So if I open this up, it's just a simple command here, curl, and just to trigger it. There is I put a status here, it's a key that's needed for it to work, but this could be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be. So I'll go ahead and go into Capacities. Those files are already there. So if I was to come in here and trigger the keyboard shortcut, it should take just a little bit here for it to trigger, and then it adds all the information here in Capacities. So we can see how that is set up here. All right, so that's pretty much it. There are a few moving components to this. The main one is going to be N8N and any of the syncing mechanisms from your devices. The hotkey and using Alfred, you don't need to use that one at all. This setup here has been working pretty well for me. Hopefully this is giving you some insights on how you could potentially use N8N to bridge the gap between your handwriting and your text-based note-taking app. And yeah, just bring them all together and make it a little bit easier to transition. Where before everything was just manual for me. I'd have to go into Supernote and do an export from here every time I wanted to export, and even convert it to text. Even if I used their native format, converting it to text, I would need to go in here, convert to text, copy paste it in here. Yeah, it was all a process. So this here just saves me way more time than previous. And I think it's a bit more enjoyable. I learned something through the process, and I can make better use of my time now. Instead of searching for files and exporting and copying and pasting, this completely makes the entire process a lot easier, simpler, and it takes less time for me to do it. All right, so if you like the content in this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And until the next time, have a nice day.